Oh, so what do you think we chat about that?
Energy.
Energy.
Let's do it.
Right? Could you use some?
Yeah.
Most people can. Correct?
Everyone thinks I have a ton of energy because I have ADHD, and they're like, "You seem like you have an unlimited supply." I'm like, "Not really." Maybe when I was a kid.
Hey, they still, that still, they draws attention, doesn't it?
Sometimes, I'd say sometimes maybe I do.
So
feel
energy
like
is really a positive thing any way you look at it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about his life. So let's go on with that. Let's get started. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Let's go.
All right. Rolling, brother. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Flip the Script. I'm with Cam, hanging out on what we like to call game day, podcast day. And topic, energy. Could you use some? Who couldn't? So let's think about energy. I like to think of it as a commodity, a currency. The more we have, I would say the wealthier we are, right? I mean, think about energy. It's probably, it is the life-sustaining thing by which the universe creates everything, right? Think about it. Where's the highest source of energy for us? It would be the sun. That sun gives us chlorophyll that gives us plants. Those plants give us food, and those plants also sustain the life of the meat and protein that we're consuming via the plants that these other species eat, right? So think about it. Life is energy, and the beginning of it starts with our universe, our creation, the sun. So again, who couldn't use it? The more you accumulate over a lifetime, the richer one is, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's the famous quote, health is wealth. People always talk about that. But I don't know. Every time I think of somebody that's like real sad, they always seem low energy. You know what I mean? If you look at someone that's depressed, they're just like, I think it's called psychomotor retardation. And the first time I heard it, I was like, "What'd you call me?" or whatever. But I was real depressed from this breakup when I was like,
retard word came. I know
19, and my nurse practitioner was like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" I didn't say anything. She was like, "You're moving really slow because you're depressed." And anyway, she could just tell. But like whenever someone's depressed, like they have less energy. It's super weird. You know what I mean?
That's
and when
exactly
you're happier,
right.
like you have more energy, you're happier.
And the brain works that way too. We'll, I'll discuss that as well. So yeah. Again, so this is what I want to go over today. So like I said, think of it as a currency, and if your energy account is low, all right, let's talk about how we can build up that portfolio. So we're going to go in a little bit today into the energy cycle, and we'll talk about that and how that accumulates together, because it does have a direct effect on you and the brain. Well, same thing when we were in college. I was mentioning this to Chris earlier. In the wintertime, the cold weather, and then here comes this, March, early spring, and we get a semi-warm day. It's not a summer day, but it's in the 60s. What does everybody do? Everybody goes out to the lawn, they get out in the sun there, and they get that energy, and they have that positive attitude that was hard to carry them through, the colder time, the winter time, and again, it affects our thought. Same thing with that, the energy itself, by what we use as energy, which is known as ATP. This is sort of the gasoline that runs us, and our mind uses a great deal of it. So like I like to say, if you're going to use that energy, why not make it positive? Very good point. So if you don't mind, and also too, this quote I like to use is, whenever you change your energy, you change your life. Just like you said, energy goes low, depression follows. Energy up, positive attitude. So change your energy, and you change your life. That's pretty phenomenal. So if we want to take a minute, we could talk a little bit about how what we consume every day has a direct effect on what kind of energy we're going to be carrying. It literally does make a difference. So if we look at it as the currency of life, and you and I were talking about, we want to build up our reserves. The currency for the body is a product called ATP. Now, if you need to, it's adenosine triphosphate. But we're going to simplify everything today. So don't go run off. You're not getting tested on this later. But let's just call it ATP. The more ATP that we can accumulate over our lifetime, the richer we're going to be. There's our energy, right? So we want to do everything we can to, like I said earlier, build that portfolio. Is there something you can do daily? Yes, absolutely, positively. And we're going to teach this in hopefully as a simple explanation as possible. So let's get on our thinking caps for a minute. And trust me, hopefully this is not going to hurt. We're going to try to keep it simple. Okay. Chris, help me here. I'm going to pull my whiteboard up. How's that look?
Looks good. Looks good.
Can we see me? How about, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
All right. So, energy in a skinny, if you will, as far as what goes on in the body. So we're going to start off with some food. And that food is going to give us some glucose. We're going to take this glucose, we're going to run it through that beautiful liver of ours. And out the back end of this, we're going to make some pyruvate. Now, don't get all caught up in this because don't really, in this class, don't remember this necessarily. Don't have to necessarily remember this. Let's talk about what happens downstream. So here with this pyruvate, we're going to pick up the power cell of the body known as the mitochondria. The more of these we have, mitochondria, think of this as your bus that's carrying the power. The more that we can fit in there, the more power we're going to have, the more energy we're going to have. So where did we find the largest accumulation of these guys? How about the brain? Something that uses a great deal of energy. We'll talk about this later. 25% of the body's energy actually gets used in the brain of the ATP, let me put it that way. Also, the heart, all right, needs a lot of energy. And the large muscles of the body, they also require an increased amount of mitochondria. So from the mitochondria here, we're going to push this into our what's known as the Krebs cycle, and this is where all that energy is coming from. So the key here is to get this glucose into pyruvate into the Krebs cycle for the energy. Now when we do that, this is where we're going to make our ATP. This is where our energy is going to come from. So anything that we can do between here and here to increase the amount of that ATP output that we get, that after we run through the cycle, the more energy we have. And this is what we can do daily for ourselves to either increase our energy or decrease that currency that makes us wealthy. Because remember, like we were talking about earlier, right? The true health or the true wealth is your health, right? Because what good is it to have all this cash, for example, travel about the world or the country, wherever you're going, if you can't walk more than a mile or two to enjoy it, right? Before you got to sit down, no energy left. And for some people, they can't even travel because they don't even have the energy to get up, to get on the plane, to get, or car to ride to wherever their destination is. So here's our key. This is what we want. Now, when we run through this Krebs cycle, the key to this is we want to get as much ATP out the back end as possible. How do we do that? What is something that you can do daily to increase the amount of energy that gets in this cycle? Start with your B vitamin. Vitamins and minerals are the key here to running this. So my B vitamin, again, I want an organic source of the B vitamin. Those synthetics, Bs that you buy in most stores aren't really going to do the trick. Go to food if we have to. If you don't like a vitamin, okay, get your brewer's yeast. Trader Joe's, Publix, Kroger's, I don't care. Organic brewer's yeast, sprinkle it on your food. It's a little nutty flavor, right? There's your B1, B2, B3, all your B vitamins are in there, so that's the way to go too. B vitamins key, then minerals, all right? Primarily magnesium, manganese, iodine. So again, the green leafies. So in the diet is the secret to running this energy cycle. Now, if we're not getting that in our diet, people, then you understand the importance of supplementation for the energy that we need to run it on a daily basis. If we don't get this, all right, we wind up with a deficiency in our ATP. There goes our energy. Now, so if we're not pushing this through the cycle, whatever doesn't get in here is the glucose. We're consuming food and we get this glucose and we get all this sugar, right? But we don't have enough of these nutrients to get it into the Krebs cycle. Then where's it going to go? Well, it's going to overload because it can't get in. I want you to think of these as like, here's your ticket to get in on the ride. And if you don't have a ticket to go on the ride, well, then you got to go over here and hang out in the no fun game. This is where what does not get into the cycle does not get overused. We're going to build up lactic acid. And of course, you know what that feels like when you go to the gym. That's that discomfort when it builds up in the tissue. Uric acid, which in my opinion is the single best indicator if there's a cardiovascular issue coming along. And then of course the pyruvic acid. So this all, and like I write in my book, in my opinion, this is your underlying, in my hypothesis, cause of most of the fibromyalgia that we're dealing with on such an epidemic portion today, which basically, again, is a vitamin and nutrient mineral deficiency. This creates the buildup of that lactic acid in the tissue, which so many people with fibromyalgia are familiar with, in the shoulders, neck, back area. So, again, a disease that's being treated with anti-inflammatories, and for so many people who I've found in my clinic over the years, antidepressants, because they just can't get a grip on why they're experiencing pain on a daily basis. And with this, remember, now we're not getting the ATP in there, because if we don't run it through the Krebs cycle, we wind up with only about 2 to 6 ATP on the back end. All right? And if that happens, then we have no energy and there's chronic fatigue. Does chronic fatigue go along with symptoms like fibromyalgia? You bet. And how many people are dealing with chronic fatigue in our society today? So that's how important it is to get our nutrients to run our energy cycle. Once this happens, then we cleave off a little oxygen up here, okay? And on the back end of this, if we have these nutrients now, we're getting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 36 units of this ATP. And a little carbon monoxide on the outside as well. So that's the byproduct of getting it through the energy cycle. You're going to get about 6 times the amount of energy available with these nutrients as if you don't. So this is what we can do on a daily basis to improve our daily energy. So why not do it? All right. With this right here, of course, you know, this is something that we can do on a daily basis. Most people tend to think of that energy is for young guys like you. All right. I say not so fast, okay? It's possible if we can continue to put the right energy in our body, because I'm 65 here in a couple months, and I ain't taking that ride. I'm taking my energy to the grave with me. Dig? Okay? Because this is that little thing that I can do on a daily basis to amp up my energy, right? And there is the key to getting it done, as I like to say. So again, along this pathway, this is what we know that can help increase that energy in our daily body, right? It's the vitamins and the minerals. So if something increases it, then obviously there's going to be some things that we can consume daily that will decrease it, right? Now, I think we talked about that. One of those you brought up for me was sugar. Because with the sugar, we're running high glucose, and if we don't have these nutrients to get into the cycle, guess what they got to do? Then they got to be, they don't get in, and they go off and cause inflammation, and then of course that glucose has to be stored in the fat cell. Right?
So if people are consuming a lot more sugar, do they need even more B vitamins to offset all of that?
Awesome, you're exactly right. Because people who crave carbohydrates,
that's okay.
The
You
B
told
vitamin
me that.
deficiency
You told me
we
that.
talked about,
and I
and
actually
this-
experienced that because I wasn't taking a B vitamin, and Mom, I was like, "Do you have any of that? What's it called? The standard process."
the Cataplex B,
Cataplex B, yeah.
B core.
Yeah, I said, "Do
That's
you have
the
any of that?"
bomb.
And she had like a whole bottle of it, and so I started taking it. And recently, I've upped it to 3 a day instead of 2. I was just doing 2, and now lately I've been doing 3. But that kicked a lot of sugar cravings. I was like, "That's interesting."
It does. One of the things that we balance, but that we base somebody's sugar handling problem, as we call it, when they crave the sweets, for example, is the B vitamin deficiency.
Interesting.
So when you bring that in, and yes, and I also in my
carbs
clinical
in general,
practice as
right?
well. What's that?
Carbs in general,
Yes.
though, right?
Yes,
so
carbs
like,
as well.
if someone's craving anything they might crave anyway,
So good point there. With that in mind, too, right? Like we were just talking about with this. Remember we talked about in the vitamins and mineral podcast that we did, what sucks that B vitamin out of the body like a vacuum cleaner?
yeah, carbs, bread,
Breads.
stuff like that.
That's right. So you see in the amount of bread that we consume today, is there any wonder, if you will, that we have the chronic fatigue and the fibromyalgia because we're sucking these B vitamins out when we're consuming our food? So yes, exactly. Just as there's something we can do positively, there's things that we need to avoid negatively.
And if you're not doing the one, if you're doing one, you're most likely not doing the other. You know what I'm saying? So like,
Right.
Like,
Good point.
The
Yes.
bad part is not only did the vitamins get taken out of the food, but it was like now you have to supplement it, which no one's doing. So
That's
it's
correct.
like it's actually twice as bad almost. You know what I mean?
Because on the other end, that so many people are running after that sugar again to give them that buzz, to bring that energy up just temporarily because they're deficient in their B vitamin and their minerals, which is actually part of their diet as well. So they're trying to jumpstart that, if you will, or kick a dead horse with sugar, creating an even worse problem.
Is that why people seem to have a change in energy levels once they've done a low carb diet, whether it's keto, carnivore, or just under 40 carbs a day? They say that their energy levels are more consistent, but also there's they end up feeling more energetic after a couple.
Yes,
of weeks.
once their body gets to where it starts working into burning the fat for the energy. Yes, exactly. They have short-term high burst of energy here because, again, here's that little bit of 6 ATP that we're getting used up, which if we're not running this, good point, what we're talking about, this is the person who might have some energy early in the day, but by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, boom, the fire's out.
Yeah.
So this is sort of like trying to heat your house, if you will, with just paper. Okay, it's gonna burn hot for a while, right? And the next thing you know, Jack, you're in the cold because there's no sustainable energy coming out the back end here of the Krebs cycle because of the lack of these nutrients.
Which is hilarious to think
Bingo.
about somebody heating their house with paper. You'd look at them like, you're an idiot for doing that.
Well, some people, given situations, that's
Right.
Again, it's a rich source that burns up very
Well-
quickly, so it's not sustainable. And this kind of diet is not sustainable either over time for the energy, which is what we're consuming in today's world, right? Because we're losing all those nutrients.
One problem is that people always learn. You know how it's at you have to let them make their own mistakes. Talking about their kids, that's how it kind of is. Like people don't really believe it until they try it, and
Yeah.
it makes an actual difference in how they feel.
You were talking about that, and then the same thing that I do in my practice when I start putting people on the organic B vitamin. And of course, I use my standard process, and Cataplex B or Cataplex B Core is my favorite.
Yeah, that's what
it's
I'm
my
using.
go-to. It's the bomb. But when I do that, I might give it to somebody on Monday, and I'll see them again on Tuesday and Wednesday. How's it going? Boom, energy's already up. That's enough said. That is proof in the pudding how quickly these nutrients to the body can give us that outcome. If it's organic. Now, when you get into the synthetic vitamins, sorry people, we're talking about a little different story. Sometimes you might get some pretty pee for a bit, and you might get some energy for a while, but typically the body sees that as like, what the hell is that? And can actually cause depletion over time. So go organic where you can to get this effect. And that's it. Now, another thing that will block this big time is certain medications. And the worst one, and the reason why, again, we're not studying, this is not homework, but I want you to understand that there's an enzyme called coenzyme A reductase that is necessary to push this whole thing. That is exactly what your statin cholesterol lowering drug blocks. So if I'm blocking this enzyme, I'm not getting to this, right? Side effect of statin drugs, clinical experience, ask anybody who takes them, fatigue. All right, not only fatigue, by the fact they actually tell you on their commercials, tell your doctor immediately if you experience back and leg pain, because you're losing this oxygen carrying capability within the muscle tissue. And that's where the largest amount of the mitochondria are. So there's your sign that this is a having a negative effect on the body. I like to say, people, statin drugs, I'm sorry, find you another way. Again, you know my theory on cholesterol. Most of it's a hormonal related issue anyway. Find you something else, because most people who, once they start these statin drugs, I've seen it, it's in my practice all the time. Like I like to say, you can hang up the cleats and the running shoes, get out your house slippers, because you're not getting off the porch that much anymore. Side effect of that. And the side effect long-term on a statin drug is cognitive decline. Okay? Yeah.
Dang.
So how about that? Senility. Well, not if you think about the fact of it. Remember, like we talked about earlier, I'll go into this in a minute. The brain, that's a good point. Let's go to that. The brain consumes 25% of our ATP daily. So the largest, quite a bit of that. Think about that brain. That brain is loaded with what? Mitochondria, right? Okay. So it needs a lot of fuel. The other interesting thing too, Cam, is this. The average person uses about their weight, their body weight every day in ATP. Yes. Pretty phenomenal. So we need to reduce this and a lot of that, okay? A lot of that for function. So if the brain's using 25% of the ATP, right, on a daily basis, let's think about that for a minute. So thought comes into the brain, we use energy, right? So wouldn't we be more beneficial using our currency on something wisely? Does that make sense to you? Remember, again, ATP, think about it. The more you got in the bank, the richer you are, the more energy you have. In the long run, the more energy you have. So if I'm going to use my ATP up with my brain and thoughts, let's make it a positive thought, right? Why not? It takes just as much energy for a negative thought as it does a positive thought. So, like, you wouldn't throw your money away. You wouldn't walk down the street, see some total stranger you don't know, and write him a check for $1,000, would you? Boom. Okay, you're never going to see him again. You really, which, hey, if you can't afford that for some people, hey, excellent behavior, right? Do the right thing. But on the average, you're not. You're going to save some of that, right, for a rainy day. So the same thing with your thought patterns. Save that energy for something good and positive when you can. Don't usurp it to the bad guys. Don't let the bad guys take too much of your good stuff, right? Because in the long run, they're probably not going to use it wisely, so you should. Stress, same thing, right? Stress will also zap this ATP out of your life too. So again, everybody's stressed in this society, but in the perfect world, if we could limit that as much as you possibly can, save that energy for longevity. Think about it, right? So another thing, when it comes to this is another thing. In today's world, if you ask a lot of people, hey man, I'd love to live to 90 or 100. What you'll find is a lot of people saying, I don't think I want to go there, right? Kind of understandable in today's society now, because so many people have some kind of physical ailment by the time they get into their 70s or early 80s. So a lot of people see that aging process as, either, the cane, the bad hips, walking around, moving slower, maybe some oxygen support. Doesn't have to be that way, though. If I've got my ATP saved up, I don't have to go there. So I will ask my patients this, and I will get the same answer almost every damn time. Hey, if you could make it into your 90s with vitality, with that longevity, and you had the energy to do so, would you do it? 100% of the time across the board, yeah, I'll take that. So it's not the aging process that scares people so much. It's the lack of the energy to carry it into their golden years or into longevity. So this is your way. This is your ticket right here.
Hey, Doc, you know what my dad said? He said, they lied to me about these golden years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was just supposed to be at the end of the rainbow, pal. Yeah. Well, if you're like me, you fall off a rainbow from time to time. But just get back up and get on it, right? Yeah, the golden years. Well, they're out there somewhere, people, and they're doable. Okay, so that's my little ditty on energy. It's totally something that we master. It's up to us, right? And again, when you change your energy, you change your life. Cool.
So
you got?
The only two questions I had was sleep and then also caffeine. Like you have, a lot of these energy drinks have like synthetic caffeine, and I've noticed that'll make my heart rate go crazy, but I don't really feel anything like as far as energy at all. But then I started drinking coffee, and whether it's espresso or just black coffee, and I did notice heart rate didn't spike, and then also I did feel better energy from that.
Well, now you're talking something that also helps increase the sufficiency of the energy cycle, because coffee is a source of polyphenols. And polyphenols, I want you to think more like an antioxidant. So we know how important those are. And polyphenols are loaded with that. So coffee is one of them. These, when you're talking about green, like when you're talking about the bright colors of the rainbow for fruit, most of those, like the red grape, polyphenols. Another great source we talked about, the cruciferous vegetables. They're high in that. They help the source of this with the Krebs cycle and the mitochondria. Part of the energy necessary for the mitochondria create oxidation. So these polyphenols help the body and the mitochondria less stress put on them as they want to produce the ATP and the energy. So that's a beautiful, good point. So yes, so caffeine. And another good thing in moderation is dark chocolate. So that sounds pretty good for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, I've heard
okay,
that.
so see, it's not all bad. Some of that is good. These are the polyphenols that help in the energy process with that. So when you get a lot of these, like you're talking about those energy drinks, well, some of that, a lot of stuff in there when you read the label, caffeine being one of them, right? But yeah, that's a good point. I'd have to look deeper into that because not all caffeine obviously is the same, correct?
It's not.
Right, exactly.
I can
Again, we got to
feel
process.
it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've even had ones that say natural caffeine derived from, but whatever, and it still spikes the heart rate. And that was off of, I think, like 140 milligrams of caffeine. I had like 220 from coffee, and it didn't mess with my heart rate at all. But the 140 did on the synthetic, and it just goes. It's like the organic vitamins versus something
bingo.
else.
The body's used to it. Says, okay, hey, I recognize this, right? I know
Right.
how to deal with it. It's been part of our consumption for thousands of years. Yeah, so that's a good point there. Obviously adaptable with that.
What about sleep? Does sleep? I know this is just talking about nutrition with energy, but what about? Does any of this process happen more or less when we're awake versus asleep? I know the body has a lot of processes during sleep, but this is kind of like a 24-hour around the clock process.
Sure it is. Well, yeah, of course it's amped up during, when you're consuming the food, right? Then the process is coming because here comes glucose coming in. Yeah, and there's other things that also help this cycle a lot. There's another enzyme, AMP kinase, which that is also basically a major beneficial component to anti-aging. So you'll find this in with a lot of people who with longevity are producing more AMP kinase. And now another way to increase your AMP kinase production is exercise. And if you think about it, it makes sense because most people who exercise, again, to stay healthy, right, increases their longevity. So it's all part of this cycle right here, which is so cool. So this cycle is basically what runs it. a more scientific version of all this, if you will, would be Dr. Lustig's metabolical. So this is the skinny version of what he talks about in the book, and he talks about AMP kinase and a couple other kinases and how they affect the pathway for energy. But we're not going that scientific because it's not necessary. What I'm trying to make here, the understanding here is that if you want to run that energy cycle, and if you want to be rich in the currency that determines our longevity, that be the ATP, where do we want to go? Make sure you're getting your B vitamins. Make sure you're getting your minerals. Watch the diet for those things that suck the energy out of us, those drugs such as the statins. Use those if you absolutely positively have to, but question, is it really necessary? And then, of course, the most important thing, watch your sugars, watch your breads, all right? Again, when I'm running this energy cycle here, Cameron, and we were talking about the B vitamins, where are we going to get most of those from? Well, we're going to get those from the meats, especially the organ meats, and the same thing with the CoQ10, loaded in organ meat, right? So again, and then we're talking minerals. Where are we getting minerals from? Vegetables primarily, right? So you don't see any real grain in there anywhere that we're in this energy cycle, especially in today's world. Now, back when there was some grain, the B vitamins in the grain, yeah, that was okay. But today's world, that's so void. So we don't see that here, and we don't see grains in the processed carbohydrate running this energy cycle, because it doesn't.
So if you you went to a grain field and you just plucked it immediately and was chewing on it, there'd be B vitamin in there?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, if you got that, because you have that in the germ there.
I was just reading a passage in the Bible.
Same thing with the most rice, right? The rice has it as well.
It said something about Jesus'
If it's
disciples
organic.
went into a field and was picking grain and eating it like that. And so it just reminded me of that.
Now, good point here,
It's
though.
interesting.
But here's another thing. Still, when we look at the demise of a lot of civilizations and you look at cardiovascular disease, as good as that grain is, sadly, when we look at these, go back to the Egyptian mummies, they still had cardiovascular disease and dental decay when they were consuming grains. And you look at the mummies from the same time in Central America that were all meat eaters, no cardiovascular disease and no dental decay. So even though that is a rich source per se, again, we're better off.
Interesting. I remember you telling me about that. Wasn't there a documentary on that where it talked about, it's like, what was that called?
That was the Perfect Human Diet,
Perfect
which is
Human Diet.
1 hour documentary, well worth reading. And exactly, this is what the diet that got us here. All right. Yeah. So, and we also talked about that too with civilizations. The more the grain becomes implemented into it, the civilization, it tends to shorten the lifespan of that civilization. So that's powerful stuff, right?
It's good.
Yeah. So people, again, there's energy. Yeah. Couldn't we all use some? This is how you go about getting it. There is something by which we can do, okay, other than the artificial stimulants that put us in that up and down spiral. Yes, because longevity is a beautiful thing to get to. If you can, if you got the vitality, here is the answer to the vitality. All right. So, hey, until next time. Quite a bit there. Absorb some of that in. No quiz, no test. Okay. Just questions if you have them. Feel free. Send us an opine as well. Don't hesitate. So until next time, as always, I'm Dr. J with Cameron and Chris saying, hope you have yourself a great day so that
You're not missing one.
excellent behavior.